Tonight we begin with a seismic political earthquake that Washington insiders had feared, denied, and desperately tried to stop. A secret deal that did not unfold over months of public diplomacy, but in mere days that shattered decades of transatlantic trust. Days that triggered emergency sessions in Brussels. Days that left the entire Western alliance structure teetering on the edge of collapse. What Donald Trump did today crossed a red line that the national security establishment had prayed would never be touched, and when that line was obliterated, NATO did not hesitate. They responded with speed, fury, and cold, calculated unity. For 72 hours now, there had been whispers, not official channels, not State Department cables, just whispers that Trump was preparing something utterly unprecedented. Trump has always been unpredictable, yes, but he has been surgical in his unpredictability. His moves have followed a certain rhythm, a cadence, almost a signature. But what set off alarm panic in Washington and Brussels this week was that the usual rhythm went dead silent. The people who monitor Trump's orbit, the former intelligence officers, the campaign insiders, the Mar-a-Lago regulars, know the indicators: the sudden cancellation of public events, the disappearance of key foreign policy advisors from their phones, the unexplained presence of certain Russian-American businessmen in Palm Beach, and then the total communications blackout of that went dark on Tuesday night. And whenever Trump goes completely dark, it means something explosive is about to drop. Early Thursday morning, European intelligence services detected what they described as highly irregular, high-level encrypted communications, traffic between Mar-a-Lago and a known Kremlin cutout in Cyprus, traffic that had not been seen at this intensity since 2016. These are the kinds of back channels that Trump only activates when he is signaling something earth-shattering: complete realignment of American policy, a unilateral rewriting of NATO obligations, or the deliberate detonation of the post-1945 world order. Brussels didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all three at once. But what they did know was that Trump was changing America's strategic posture toward Russia dramatically, secretly, and without consultation. And when an incoming American president shifts posture on that scale without explanation, even by a few degrees, NATO pays attention. The emergency NATO statement issued tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not diplomatic theater. It was a 5-alarm code red, existential warning. Senior diplomats emerging from the emergency North Atlantic Council meeting described Trump's secret deal as reckless, dangerous, and perhaps most importantly, an open betrayal of Article 5's sacred principle of collective defense. But betrayal only works if the alliance blinks. NATO did not blink. In fact, their response today was among the fastest and most unified we've ever seen in the alliance's 75-year history. Here's what we know. Within 4 hours of the deal leaking, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg convened an emergency article for consultation, the prelude to Article 5. These weren't the usual talking shop consultations. These were war footage briefings, satellite photos, intercepted calls, financial trails, showing that Trump had already given Putin verbal assurances on immediate cessation of all military aid to Ukraine, recognition of Russian territorial gains, and a freeze on any new NATO enlargement for a decade. Multiple European capitals confirmed that NATO launched an unprecedented diplomatic and military preemptive response on multiple fronts, including the immediate forward deployment of 4 additional battle groups to the eastern flank units that had been kept in reserve for exactly this scenario. NATO moved before Trump could lock in the deal with Putin. They reinforced Estonia. They reinforced Latvia. They reinforced Romania, countries that were likely preparing to be sold out in the fine print. In other words, NATO targeted the exact geographic pressure points that would have been rendered indefensible under any understanding, the tripwire forces that would have been abandoned. This is what made the Pentagon's emergency warning so urgent. Trump's secret deal wasn't just symbolic, it was operational. That it represented the kind of move that could collapse the entire eastern flank in weeks if left unchecked. And NATO, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not emotionally, but surgically. They didn't issue another strongly worded letter. They didn't wait for the inauguration. They moved battalions. They activated air police rotations early. They put SSGNs to sea in the North Atlantic And here's where the story becomes truly chilling. Intelligence sources now believe that Trump's secret deal was designed to test the cohesion of NATO after years of his deliberate weakening of the alliance. Trump wanted to see whether NATO would fracture under the shock, whether Germany would peel off, whether France would accommodate, whether the Baltics would be left to fend for themselves. But instead, the opposite happened. NATO didn't fracture. They closed ranks with a speed and ferocity that even stunned the Pentagon's European hands. You don't get Trump's attention easily. But today, NATO did. Former U.S. officials, speaking anonymously to multiple outlets, described Trump's move as strategic arson, a deliberate attempt to burn down the alliance from within so he could rebuild European security on Moscow's terms. But NATO proved today that they remain both willing and able to defend the line, with or without Washington. Their response was not only fast, it was choreographed, so precisely that battle groups were already moving before Trump had even finished his first post-deal interview. That timing matters because it shows NATO has been wargaming this exact scenario for years. It shows that NATO is not waiting for American permission anymore. They are acting as a sovereign military alliance. Reports kept flooding in throughout the evening. We learned more about the scale of NATO's response. The United Kingdom dispatched additional Typhoons to Estonia, forcing Russian aircraft to turn back 47 times in 12 hours. Poland activated its entire territorial defense force, 400,000 reservists, and moved them to the Belarusian border. Germany, in a historic first, authorized the forward stationing of Patriot batteries in Lithuania, batteries that had been held back for years. This wasn't just a statement. This wasn't just posturing. This was forward defense. This was preemptive deterrence. And preemptive deterrence is the one thing Putin has struggled to counter since February 2022. For every concession Trump was preparing to give away, NATO countered with steel on the ground. Remember, Trump always thought NATO was obsolete. He thought America was getting ripped off. He thought the Europeans would never fight. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Europeans are fighting politically, diplomatically, and now militarily. They are paying Germany at 2.1% GDP, Poland at 4.1%, the Baltics at 3% plus, and they are leading without waiting for Washington. What makes this moment so dangerous and so consequential is that Trump's secret deal happened at a time when he is under maximum pressure. The MAGA base wants victory over the forever wars. The Tucker Carlson wing wants peace with Russia at any price. The military and complex wants continued funding streams. The national security establishment wants to contain China and knows a broken NATO makes that impossible. Trump is balancing these contradictory demands while facing criminal trials, political isolation, and a transition team tearing itself apart. And when leaders in that position make sudden, secret deals with authoritarian adversaries, they're not doing it from strength, they're doing it from desperation. NATO's statement, now circulating in full, was designed to signal that the alliance is not willing to accept unilateral American withdrawal. Senior officials said plainly that Trump's secret deal was fundamentally incompatible with membership obligations under the North Atlantic Treaty. That is diplomatic language for, we will treat any attempt to dissolve NATO commitments as an attack on the alliance itself. You don't usually hear that tone from Brussels unless the very existence of the alliance is at stake. Meanwhile, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk addressed the nation in a grim, defiant speech tonight. He said, Poland will never again trust its security to promises made in Mar-a-Lago. He said, if America chooses Putin over NATO, Europe will choose itself. And he said, we are ready to defend every inch of Allied territory, with or without Article 5. These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a Europe that understands the stakes have become existential. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Trump's secret deal wasn't isolated. Along with the Ukraine sellout, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán suddenly announced he is reconsidering Hungary's NATO membership. Serbian President Vučić increased military cooperation with Moscow. Russian state television began openly discussing post-NATO security architecture. All of this happened within the same 48-hour window. When multiple pro-Russian actors move at once, it means the Kremlin believes the great prize is within reach. Analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Trump is preparing a grand bargain to end the Ukraine war on Moscow's terms before he even takes office. Another is that he is attempting to force Europe to pay more by threatening abandonment. A third possibility, the one terrifying officials the most, is that Trump has already promised Putin a free hand in Moldova and the Baltics in exchange for help against China. But today, NATO took that third option off the table. They didn't beg, they didn't negotiate, didn't wait, they deployed. What we're watching now is the ultimate test of resolve. Trump wants to see if NATO will crack under American abandonment. NATO wants to show it can survive and fight without the United States. The Baltic states want to prevent being traded away. And Russia wants to see if the West's greatest alliance dies, not with a bang, but with a Mar-a-Lago handshake. Tonight, sources inside the Pentagon confirmed they are quietly preparing contingency plans for a NATO that operates without American participation. They say the mood in Brussels is not panic, it is cold fury. They say European plans are being accelerated by years. And they say Trump's decision to go rogue has done what Putin never could: unite Europe against both Moscow and Washington simultaneously. But NATO is not backing down. In fact, NATO is doubling down. Their response today, swift, unified, and militarily credible, sent a message to Trump that the alliance will not be dismantled by tweet or backroom deal. And it sent a message to Putin that Europe is prepared to fight alone if it must. As this historic night continues, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Trump promised Putin in those secret talks. But what we do know is that NATO's response was timely. It prevented immediate collapse of Ukrainian resistance. It bought precious months for European rearmament, and it proved that the alliance Trump called obsolete is, in fact, more alive than ever. What happens next will depend on what Trump does in the next 48 days. If he doubles down, this moment will be remembered as the day NATO declared independence from Washington. If he backs off, NATO has already shown they are ready. They have shown they are ready to defend the continent. Whatever America chooses to do. And tonight, for the first time since 1949, NATO appears to be preparing for a future without the United States. Washington is in chaos. Mar-a-Lago is silent. To silent. And when Trump is silent, it means he is calculating his next move. Because tonight, Donald Trump learned something he has never accepted before: that NATO is bigger than one man, that Europe will not be bullied, and that some red lines, once crossed, cannot be walked back. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear: the alliance held, the line was drawn in steel, and the post-American era in European security has already begun. We will be here, watching every development as history unfolds in real time.